My name is Doug Quinn. I live in Toms River, New Jersey. Regular guy living on the shore, living a dream life. Superstorm Sandy hit me and wiped me out. And hey, no big deal. I got lots of flood insurance. I believe in insurance, but you will see in the video we're showing things were very, very different than what we expected. And I want to tell you, we had a huge fight. It took me 7 years to get home with $250,000 of flood insurance. We uncovered massive fraud in the National Flood Insurance Program and some of the vendors that were involved. And one of the greatest things that happened was I got hooked up with this little group of people out of Southern New Jersey called the New Jersey Organizing Project, who basically became political mentors for me because I had the story, I had the passion and the desire to do something, but I really didn't have the skill set. And what I learned, this group in New Jersey Organizing Project has basically allowed me to run a national nonprofit that takes on one of the most powerful industries in America. We are making a big difference, specifically because of the grassroots political organizing skills that I learned right here.
Insurance is an important risk management tool that most Americans use to protect themselves in the event of a catastrophic loss. Each year, consumers responsibly pay insurance premiums to protect their families and property. Unfortunately, many policyholders find that upon suffering a loss, collecting an honest claim becomes a difficult ordeal.
When the storm surge came, our house was surrounded by about 6 feet of water. I still felt good. I was like, we're insured. I actually wasn't even worried a little bit. You know, I've been paying my premiums for almost 15 years. It's gonna be okay. And they came back and they said, no, it was like this before. It was pre-existing, $29,000. But our repair estimate was over $250,000. How was I gonna rebuild a tenth of a house? I've got 2 little kids that are 9 and 12 that they need a home. They need somewhere to live, right? And then I started realizing how alone we were and how nothing was gonna get fixed. And the longer time went on and the savings started straining out, how do you pay them? Are we really gonna lose the house in foreclosure because we're getting screwed by an insurance company?
I was living in a home on a Jersey shore. I was a financial advisor for 30 years, so I believe very strongly in insurance. I still believe very strongly in insurance. I had bought the maximum legal amount of flood insurance that I could buy. My house got probably between 3 and 4 feet of water inside of it, and it caused massive damage. You know, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That's what I bought insurance for. I was confident that I would be back home very quickly. My insurance came out and offered me 37 cents on the dollar.
Insurance is one of the most powerful industries in the nation. Insurance companies spend billions on advertising, lobbying, political contributions, and quasi-law enforcement organizations to protect them. This is funded by policyholder premiums. Ironically, policyholders often find that this power can be used against them.
When consumers buy insurance, they buy it to cover their house. They don't read those policies. And when the insurance company comes back and tells them, no, there's an exception, it was a pre-existing condition like Doug's home, we were talking about, then the homeowners just kind of go away. They don't know that the insurance adjuster may not be telling them the truth.
It started out well. A claim adjuster came out and we talked it through. He took photographs and I knew what was in the report. And then, months went by, year and a half, and finally I get a claim denial letter. Nothing you had is covered. So the lesson that I learned and I still talk about is, you may have homeowners insurance, but if you can't live in your house for 2 or 3 years while you're fighting and incurring expenses, and your business is shut down, and you have to hire a law firm, it's going to take a good chunk of the settlement, you do not have protection for your lifestyle.
Insurers hire third-party vendors in the claims process. Engineers, adjusters, third-party administrators, and attorneys are hired to represent the carrier's interests. Some have been caught in dishonest practices and even fraud to support systematic underpayment of claims.
What's worse is that the insurance companies also get to use high-priced attorneys that drag out claims litigation and force FEMA and policyholders to pick up the tab. Pretty incredible. Mr. Quinn, do you find that policyholders are getting their money's worth on these administrative costs that they're paying for?
No, Senator. In most cases, and I will speak as a policyholder, we are outraged that our premium dollars are being wasted by engineering firms, insurance companies, and law firms who are committing fraud to cheat the program and cheat policyholders.
60 Minutes told the story of how U.S. Forensic changed an engineer's report that originally said Ramey's house was a total loss.
It plainly said there was structural damage to the house. But this is the report the insurance company sent to Cable when they denied his claim. Quote, not structurally damaged. They said the damage was long-term. Braun told us not only were changes made to his engineering reports, but he was asked to cover it up.
How many of those reports were doctored?
At least 175 of them, or approximately 96% is the number that I calculated.
175 of your reports were doctored?
Correct. They were altered.
When the safety net of insurance that they put in place and they've been paying premiums for years, in some cases decades, when that safety net fails, what people go through is horrendous.
It took 3.5 years in total for us to finally move home, and in that time we were broken in ways I can't even begin to explain, but I'll try, because I was so riddled with like anxiety and depression that I couldn't even go to the grocery store. Like regular stuff I just could not do. It was so hard because this was our whole lives.
I roll into a town after a catastrophe a year later, and there's still all these people that are not taken care of, that don't have enough money from the insurance company to get back in their homes or repair their homes.
I've seen adjusters that deny roofs that should totally be approved. And so all of that stuff needs to be exposed.
We did 600 claims in 2020, and about 200 of the claims had engineers involved, and 80% of those reports we got back were literally incorrect addresses, wrong photos, copy and pasted paragraphs.
Why does FEMA, Mr. Quinn, repeatedly keep hiring these lawyers and engineers who act like thieves? They get paid for not paying claims, not for paying them, right?
That is correct.
It's unconscionable.
Yes, sir.
To have these outside entities that come in and repeatedly abuse policyholders.
During Sandy, there were all these billboards up about fraud, and we were going to prosecute fraud, but it was always pointing at the storm survivors as the ones that were committing the fraud, right? Not at the insurance companies. And so what we've realized is we've got to set up our own infrastructure that takes on carrier-side fraud.
The average person doesn't have the ability to stand up to an agency of their government or to the insurance industry, which is one of the most powerful industries in the country, especially somebody, having just been through the trauma of a loss.
Like, how do I, as a single homeowner, how do I fight against this massive fraud that's being perpetrated?
In July 2018, a group of consumer advocates banded together to form the American Policyholder Association, a nonprofit watchdog organization that promotes integrity, honesty, and best practices in insurance property loss adjustment. The APA focuses on the need for prosecution of insurer fraud against consumers and board complaints against licensed professionals for the unethical conduct of their profession.
There's really nobody out there turning in cases on behalf of consumers who are being defrauded by participants of the insurance industry.
Since most property insurance fraud prosecution defends insurance companies and not policyholders, the APA formed the first special investigation unit that focuses on insurer fraud against consumers.
Before, when people have an organized approach to a case, it helps when anyone is evaluating it, whether or not ultimately that can be successful.
We have to make the the justice system aware of what's going on. The attorney generals have to be aware of what's happening. They need to band together and say, we've got to stop this. We've got to fight for our constituents.
I'm here supporting the APA because I was Attorney General of Mississippi for 16 years. Without somebody out there fighting for them, be it the APA or lawyers or public adjusters, somebody out there to explain to them what their rights are, then many of them, they have a great success rate of people just going away. After Katrina, I learned, their whole motto was delay, delay, delay. We hope you will go away.
When litigation breaks out, it may result in a positive outcome on a financial basis, but it gets sealed in a confidential agreement, and their companies are willing to pay extra money in settlement for that confidentiality because they don't want what they were doing to become public knowledge. It can only come back to hurt them time and again in future negotiations. But the threat of imprisonment is a daunting threat hanging over the head of perpetrators. APA, kudos for getting in the game at that level.
Unfortunately, before this organization pushed that mission, I don't know of very many instances where government officials, representatives, attorneys general, district attorneys were even aware of this problem existing.
The APA puts special emphasis on working with state attorneys general. The AG is the top law enforcement official in every state. AGs have taken on powerful special interests such as big tobacco, the opioid crisis, and big tech to defend consumers.
You can see us as a united front on your behalf as we are partners together, as we see what the long-range goal is, and we can achieve it with one another.
And we appreciate the association because what it does is it helps to bring education to the process. And look, I always believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant, a lot of transparency, a lot of education, and hopefully when it's all said and done, consumers benefit.
So needed in our country now because we have to look out for policyholders. And so many policyholders, I think, just go to someone they know or a company that they've heard of and they don't know what's best without talking to other people. So I think it's a great organization.
So everything has been building up to the point where now people can actually refer over a potential fraud case, and now we have investigators that can look into this and find out whether there's, the facts and witness support a charge, a literal criminal charge of insurance fraud.
We now recognize and we know pathways and, with partners like APA, the great things that we can do, and again, how we can be there for those victims. Having that basis, that information, going that extra mile for those policyholders, those individuals, that's what's key. And we are so grateful for that.
I want to thank the American Policyholder Association for their advocacy over the years. The APA makes sure that the voices of all types of policyholders are heard in Washington so that federal laws and regulations are not stacked against them. Policyholders of any kind of insurance deserve respect and dignity throughout the claims process, and I'm pleased that the American Policyholders Association continues to advocate for these goals.
Our message to elected officials is we came to fight. We came to fight in defense of the American consumer. You're either going to fight with us or you're going to fight against us, but we're not going away.
Every day, members of the American Policyholder Association work together to honor the American tradition of standing up to injustice. We defend those who are overwhelmed by large, powerful interests and need a voice of their own. We are that voice, and we are calling for justice, fair play, and American values. Come join us.
All righty. What you see in that video, and we are a national organization now, you'll see us meeting with attorneys general, with senators, with congressmen, the White House chief of staff, We've testified to multiple state legislatures, including here in New Jersey. I've testified in favor of the NFIP REACT on the floor of the US Senate this summer, all from stuff that we learned right here where you are right now with the New Jersey Organizing Project. I mean, I say things that I've heard from Amanda or some of the people at NJOP, and people look at me with awe and wonder like I just reinvented the wheel. And it's just old school grassroots political organizing that I've learned here. And we were able to take it onto a national stage. And I'll give you an idea. One of the attorneys general you saw in there was Jim Hood, who is the former attorney general of Mississippi. If everybody remembers the Mississippi burning case with the 4 civil rights workers who were murdered in Mississippi, when he became the attorney general of Mississippi in the early 2000s, he found one of the people involved in that case, one of the perpetrators that had never been prosecuted, and he had him prosecuted and convicted and sentenced to 3 life sentences. This is somebody who's just an absolute hero. And here he is, standing up on behalf of policyholders. And we started with the National Flood Insurance Program, with the fraud from Sandy. And one of the things we found out is, suing people just makes the lawyers rich. What we did differently in Sandy is we all worked together, NJOP included, and we're able to get the Attorney General in New York to raid an engineering firm and walk one of their executives out in handcuffs. And that one criminal arrest, criminal versus a civil lawsuit, because they laugh at the lawsuits. 2% of people sue, 98% of the time they get away with it. But the one criminal arrest, we were able to get the NFIP to reopen 144,000 claims and have $350 million paid out to people who had been cheated, and revamp this whole NFIP appeals process. So, what are we talking about with the NFIP? One of the things we want is, and let me just hit my timer here because NJOP is strict about starting on time and ending on time, and I am a prolific overtime user. So I'm going to put a timer on. What do we want for flood insurance? What works? We want flood insurance that works for flood survivors and our communities, not flood insurance that works for the politically connected people and the attorneys and engineers and insurance companies who profit off it. So flood insurance needs to have reforms that helps disaster survivors. It gives affordability, transparency. Mitigation is very, very important because, again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When we talk about mitigation, they've done studies to say that for every dollar spent on mitigation, preventing a problem before the storm happens, you save $6 that you would have spent on the back end cleaning up the mess. And that's an actual FEMA study that did that. So anything that focuses on mitigation, very, very important. But we need a flood insurance program that actively protects people and households from flood risk. It's great to have an insurance policy that comes in and pays, but it's so much better to not go through the problem, right? Is it better to not get into a car accident than it is to get a settlement and your car repaired later and have to go through all that pain and agony? And I know many of us know what I mean when I say pain and agony, because I see it all over the country. So, it's really important that we have mitigation as part of the calculation. One of the problems that we're dealing with right now, and I want to talk about some of the solutions too with the NFIP REACT, which is critical, but some of the problems we're having right now is there's a failure to identify and communicate risk. Right now, there's no law that says if you're buying a house that you have to disclose, the sellers or the people renting to you have to disclose flood risk to you. And a lot of people do not understand the risk. There's not even accurate flood maps for the whole United States. There's vast sections of the country that have not had flood maps done, and people don't understand. I was in Hurricane Florence in North Carolina, and that little creek in the backyard raised 17 feet and wiped people out that were 100 miles from the ocean, inland in Lumberton, etc. We were just down in the eastern Kentucky floods in the Appalachian Mountains, literally saw creeks that were 3 inches deep and 3 feet wide go up 15 feet. And wipe out a bunch of people, and people just don't understand the risk that's associated with it. So it's important that we identify and communicate risk to people, which we haven't been doing. And obviously there's a lack of affordability. Risk rating 2.0, and we can talk more about that later when we get into questions, but it is a nightmare. It went into effect in October of 21 for people with new policies, April of 22 for existing policies. They can cap your premiums. They can go up as high as 18% for your original home or primary residence, 25% for a secondary home. They are expecting about 72% of the people in the National Flood Insurance Program will have their premiums go up, and we've seen that. When I rebuilt my home after Sandy, I built it 10 feet up in the air. My premium just went up by 13% in July. And give you an idea, at 18% increase every year, your premium doubles every 4 years. How many people can afford that? And as people can't afford it, they drop out of the program. One of the big things that the NFIP wants to do is get more people involved. The more people we have sharing the risk, the more we spread the risk out. It's just basic risk management and insurance principles. But the less people we have, the more that risk is concentrated, the less people to share the burden, and you'll see bigger problems. They are expecting, with risk rating 2.0, about 20% of the NFIP policyholder base will drop out over the first 10 years. 20%. Now, I was at the National Flood Insurance Conference in Washington in 2018, where they launched this thing called the Moonshot, where they were going to double the amount of premium of policyholders in the NFIP by the year 2022. They haven't even come close. As a matter of fact, they're talking about going the other way now. Now they're going to start losing big chunks because of risk rating 2.0. And it's missing a lot of mitigation. There's not enough emphasis on mitigation. That is a big problem, because remember, $1 spent on mitigation saves $6 on cleanup. It is good public policy and good fiscal policy to spend that dollar up front. And the big problem we're having is a lack of transparency. You know, what we saw in Sandy, I see all over the country. The engineering firms and the law firms that were involved in the Sandy fraud, I still see all over the place. They have not removed them. These fraudsters still walk around making millions of dollars, taking advantage of people. And that's why we need to fight. That's why we need to take our collective experience and help the rest of the nation with it, because this is happening to people that have no idea what's coming, just like we had no idea what was coming. So the NFIP profiteering is insane. Write your own insurance policies were tracked at about 30% profit margins, and that's without putting a penny of their money at risk. That's just passing money back and forth between policyholders and FEMA, the NFIP, 30% profit margins, and it's obscene. And that's before you count in all the law firms, the adjusting firms, the third-party administrators, and the engineering firms who are in there just glomming money out, profit after profit after profit. And who loses in that? The consumer, the policyholder, the person on the ground, working class families who got wiped out in a flood and are depending on that safety net. They're the ones who lose. So, you know, it's a problem. We need to stand up for it. The National Flood Insurance Program was put into place in the 60s after some really bad flooding that had happened. And it's all about, you know, it's not just the insurance that should be, it's more of a bigger program. It's not just an insurance policy. The NFIP also has community rating. It also has some mitigation factors to it. It's about how do we manage flooding with some government subsidies involved. There is now some private insurance. It's one of the things that they had counted on to help them with their moonshot. We have serious concerns about private insurance. Again, in Washington at the National Flood Conference, I was able to watch people talk about what our concern is, which is they're going to cherry pick the NFIP and pull out the lowest risk properties and the easiest to insure and leave poor people and middle income people in the program with difficult policies. And, you know, one of the things we have learned from health insurance is when you have everybody in the same lifeboat, you have a better chance that they're going to make sure, the powers that be will make sure that that lifeboat is secure and seaworthy. And it's no different with flood insurance. So I literally watched, and the director of FEMA was there, Brock Long it was at the time, and, you know, a whole bunch of political figures. And I watched CEO after CEO of private flood companies who are just getting up and ramped up stand up and swear that they're not going to cherry pick the program. They're not just going to go in and pick out the easy policies. It reminded me very much of when all the big tobacco CEOs testified to Congress and swore with their hand on the Bible that they didn't believe that nicotine was addictive. And of course, later on, the scandal came out with whistleblowers that, you know, they all knew all along, and they actually went out of their way to spike tobacco to make it more addictive. But it was very similar to that. So we have a lot of concerns about private fraud just because of the fact that they're going to cherry pick and leave the problem properties and, you know, people in a difficult position in the NFIP, and also a lack of oversight and a lack of regulation, which I see with insurance all the way across the board. Insurance is the second most powerful lobby in the country. They come in just behind Big Pharma. It is problematic. Curious little statistic, the fastest growing lobby in the country is private prisons. They're not the biggest, but they're the fastest growing. One day we will very well see that as a possibility. So there are concerns about what's going on and some of the solutions that we have. One of the things I want people to understand is we need to support the NFIP REACT. And I took notes about the bullet points of the NFIP REACT. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to put an asterisk next to each one that I think was most important, that really would have made a difference in my life. And I put an asterisk next to almost every one, because after Sandy, if these things had been in place, you know, our lives would have been very, very different. One of the biggest things is affordability. It caps premium increases at 9%, not 18 and 25%. There's also, for affordability, it's means tested. There's some premium breaks for people that are low to moderate income. There is forbearance on the Treasury interest that we owe. The NFIP pays about $400 million of interest a year just to the US Treasury for the debt, because the program's in debt. It's like I moved money from my left pocket to my right pocket. Now my left pocket owes $400 million a year. So it gives us a forbearance on that, and it reallocates that money toward premium savings and reallocates it toward what is really intelligent, again, mitigation. It limits the profits of the right your own insurance company. It caps them at 22%. I'd certainly like to see it go down further, but you know, it's certainly better than the 30% plus that they make for taking advantage of us in many cases. On the mitigation front, there is an increase in ICC. Increased cost of compliance is currently a rider on your flood policy that will provide another $30,000 for you to rebuild in a compliant manner. In my case, I used it toward elevating my home, so I did not get flooded again. This raises it to $60,000. And it applies more money for loans for mitigation, for grants for mitigation. There gives more oversight and transparency of the vendors of these fraudster engineers, third-party administrators, law firms that are part of the program that are just siphoning off all the money instead of having it paid to policy. It gives us more oversight and more transparency on what we're paying. A famous case with Sandy is they interviewed Roy Wright, who was the head of the NFIP at the time, and they asked him, hey, do you know how much these vendors and flood insurance companies are making? And he was like, we have no idea. The head of the NFIP in Washington, a division of FEMA, had no idea what they're paying these companies that are out there taking advantage of us. The big thing it does is it allows us to remove the bad actors. The vendors that are part of the program that have been taking advantage of people, like I say, US Forensics, the Nielsen and Treese law firm that, you know, took advantage of people during Sandy, they're still out there. We still see them making money on the program, and FEMA will claim, well, we can't get rid of them. We don't have a mechanism. NFIP REACT allows that mechanism to remove those bad actors. And by the way, I sat on the floor of the US Senate and called these people by name and called them criminals and fraudsters, and that was entered into the permanent congressional record. And did I get sued for defamation for that? No, because you can't be sued for telling the truth. Here I am, still walking around no problem. So let them try to come after us and try to prove that that is not the case. But now that is in the permanent congressional record, and it was one of the most satisfying moments of my nonprofit career. And again, thanks to New Jersey Organizing Project, I learned how to have that voice, how to coalesce power, how to work together to make things like that happen. More with the NFIP React, it allows profit shifting. If you litigate, and like I spent $40,000 on legal fees to litigate against my insurance company to get them to honor the obligation they made when they accepted my premium. This allows fee shifting. I didn't get that money back. That didn't go into repairing my home. With NFIP Re, if that happens and I prevail in court, they have to pay my legal fees. It also fixes the dreaded earth movement exclusion. That was a big thing we see that they used. They're like, hey, the flood didn't damage your house. These giant cracks in your foundation are from shifting, a fundamental shifting of the supporting soils is the term they used, which conveniently is not covered by flood insurance. This removes that exclusion. Even if those thousands of tons of water push on the dirt and push the dirt against your house, that cracks your foundation. They use it as an exclusion and not pay your claim. That goes away with NFIP Re. There is also a payment for companies that underpay you. After Katrina, when companies did what's called wind shifting, if State Farm had your flood insurance policy and your homeowners, and the wind damaged your roof, State Farm had to pay that out of their pocket under homeowners insurance. If they said it was flood, well, then FEMA's got to pay it. So they'd be like, oh, the flood blew those shingles off your roof. That's called wind shifting. So they put in a penalty for companies that overpay out of the NFIP. They have to take it out of their pocket. The problem they didn't do is they didn't put a penalty for underpaying people. So of course, what did they do? They came in and underpaid everybody. And one of the final things is, rather than have these high-priced law firms come in and defend flood insurance, which, by the way, if you have a flood insurance policy, not only do you pay your lawyer if you litigate, but the flood insurance program pays the insurance company's attorney. So I know when I litigated, I got to pay both attorneys, which is insane. So instead of having private law firms that come in and milk the program, and there was a famous case with Sandy with one policy, it was a $25,000 claim. They should have just paid it. Instead, they did that delay. We hope you go away, fought it. It went to the insurance company's law firm that was paid by our premiums, ran up $85,000 in legal fees, just getting to pretrial motions to defend a $25,000 claim. That's insane. That goes away in the future. If with NFIP Re, then the Department of Justice defends NFIP claims. And the last thing is it makes mandatory disclosure on the part of renters or sellers who are pitching their property to potential buyers and renters. They have to disclose flood risk. They don't allow people to get blindsided. We have something that, we've developed a lot as part of the APA, and a lot of it is our experience. One of the things we have learned is that America does disaster very, very badly. Since Sandy, I've been to 15 natural disasters. And what I see is just what we learned in Sandy. No one's expecting it. No one's been through it before. Even people that have been through it before were years ago, and they're now long retired or in different positions. The disaster comes in, we all learn from scratch how to cope, how to handle insurance, how to fight, how to politically organize and coalesce power, how to form grassroots organizations like NJOP. We learn all this, we get back home, we forget it all, and we go back to our lives. And then the next community in another state gets hit, and they have to start from scratch. So one of the things we are trying to do is codify the lessons and the knowledge that we've gained and sort of export the revolution as well. I'm so happy to see NJOP in getting involved with Hurricane Ian survivors down in Florida, because what they have here with this organization is priceless and other people need it. So we've created some language, some literature with the with the APA, specifically helping people learn how to fight their insurance company. And again, The average person on their best day is in no position to fight $1 billion insurance company. Now you take someone who's just been through a loss, through a natural disaster, they're traumatized. There is a thing called disaster trauma. It is very real. Their kids are sleeping on a couch, or I lived out of my car for a month with my teenage daughter after Sandy. You're in no position in that state to fight a $1 billion insurance company. So we've put some things together. If ladies, if you want to show that piece that we have up there, which is APA literature, specifically teaching people how to self-advocate in a insurance dispute. Do we have that?
Yeah, we're dropping it in the chat.
Okay, great. It's in the chat. It's free. It's on our website. We have other literature there too. Click on it. We give you specific pressure points that you could apply to your insurance company, because not everybody can afford a public adjuster or an attorney. If you can, that's great, but not everybody can. This gives you the ability to self-advocate, and it also teaches some negotiation tips and techniques as well. So it's free. Download it, share it with your friends, use it for whatever. It's absolutely, we created it to help those who come behind us. So all that knowledge we learned is not lost. There's some continuity. And with that, we're going to start. Let's talk a little bit about some questions that people have, which is, we talked about private and public flood insurance, NFIP versus private insurance. I know someone at NJOP is going to talk a little bit about grant. There's a lot of knowledge about what your grant eligibility is and what kind of grants. One of the questions was submitted was, I don't have insurance at all because I wasn't in a floodplain. And I'm going to tell you this, what I see in disaster after disaster, hey, it's never flooded here before. Hey, we've never had a tornado here before. Hey, my family's lived here for generations. There's never been a wildfire here before. All that experience is gone. It doesn't matter anymore. Things that have never flooded will now flood because of climate change. There's never been a hurricane hit here. It will now because of climate change. That's my time, so we're going to wrap it up. People that have never had wildfires before are going to burn because of climate change. I bought my home here on the Jersey Shore. It was built in 1954. It had never flooded once. I lived here for 16 months, whoosh, 4 feet of water, cleaned my clock. So it is very critical that people buy insurance, especially flood insurance. But again, it's very important that we make it affordable and usable, and that people have confidence in the program. And one of the last questions is, my insurance underpaid me. What do I do now? You can read that piece of literature that we put in there. And the one thing I can tell you is you fight to the death. They hope you are going away. They hope you are overwhelmed. They have a tactic that's been tracked. A Rutgers law professor by the man named Jay Feynman actually wrote a book called Delay, Deny, Defend. That is the insurance industry tactics. And it was developed by a consulting company called McKinsey, one of the gold standard of consulting companies where MBAs want to go work. They developed a program to teach insurance companies how to cheat people. And I'm going to tell you this because, I had worked in the financial services industry. I was a financial advisor. My firm was owned by one of the largest insurance companies. I believed heavily in insurance. I still do. But when they underpaid me so drastically, 37 cents on the dollar, I kept thinking, they just don't get it. It's a mistake. If I just show them pictures, if I just explain it the right way. And then as time went on, it dawned on me, it is not a mistake. It is a strategy. They have meetings on how to short people. Just this afternoon, we have formed one of the first ever, you saw in the movie, prosecution teams designed to submit criminal fraud cases on behalf of consumers. I had a 2-hour meeting with our prosecution team and 3 insurance company whistleblowers who said they are taking our estimates on damage and they are crossing out damage. They're deleting it in the middle of the night. One case was, it was a $240,000 worth of damage to a house. And by the time the people back at the insurance side got done with it, $3,000. They just went in there and just delete, 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 delete. One of the people doing it was a 22-year-old person who had no experience. These estimates that it had taken an adjuster, an insurance company adjuster, hours upon hours to create. This person went in there and spent 4 minutes going through it and deleting it down to 72%, down to, deleting 93% of the claim. It's not an accident. It is a strategy. It is a system. And until we start locking more people up, listen, great, you can sue. But like I said, all that does is make the lawyers rich. What we really want to do is put handcuffs on people. If you and I stole from an insurance company the way that they steal from us, we'd be in handcuffs so fast your head will spin. And that's what all those campaign contributions and lobbying dollars do. But we don't need to spend that. I tell people about NJOP all over the country. I'm like, do you know that this organization got rental assistance put in? They got foreclosure protection put in for survivors. And most important, they got our very pro-business, pro-banking governor to sign a bill for mortgage abatement. We didn't have to pay our mortgage until we were back in our home. And that was huge because I personally was going broke. Your mortgage company still expects to get paid even though your house is gone. So I'm paying rent and I'm paying a mortgage, and I see that all over the country. And when I tell people we have this little group that doesn't spend a penny on lobbying, no campaign contributions, they make this happen, they're amazed. And kudos to NJOP for exporting that revolution and teaching other disaster impacted communities how to advocate for themselves. And with that, I am done.